Hey y'all, welcome back to the Pixelists. I'm Will, and today we're going to be talking about The Legend of Vox Machina Episode 4. Going to be walking you through all the little details and Easter eggs you may have missed. So, full disclosure, I have seen all of Campaign 1, so the things I notice here may be spoilers. I've also seen Campaign 2, and I'm up to date in Campaign 3. Sometimes that's relevant. But I will always try to err on the side of explaining a reference, pointing out an Easter egg without straight up like revealing a massive spoiler. But sometimes, that's inevitable. So take it with a grain of salt. Other than that, like I said, we are the Pixelists. That means me and my buddy Blake, we do a podcast. That's mainly what this channel is. We talk about all the nerdy things we love, including Critical Role, Campaign 3, and The Legend of Vox Machina. So if you're interested in our thoughts and stuff, you can definitely check that out. It's on the channel. Our podcast episode on episodes 4 through 6 of Vox Machina should be coming out either tonight or tomorrow. Other than that, I had one other thing I wanted to drop, and this is going to sound like a plug. I'm sorry. That's really not my intent. But I do stream on Twitch, and if you're unfamiliar, Twitch has this functionality called watch parties. As you know, Legend of Vox Machina is an Amazon Prime show. Twitch is owned by Amazon, so you are actually allowed to stream and watch Amazon Prime shows with your chat, with your audience, as long as everyone that's participating has Amazon Prime. So for those of you that have Amazon Prime that would be interested in watching through the episodes together when they drop, let me know in the comments. We can maybe figure out a few times to do that, because I end up watching these episodes several times to do these breakdowns. So it would be fun to kind of have a few different times and watch through with some of you guys. So again, if that interests y'all, let me know in the comments and maybe we could do that. But other than that, that's all I got. So let's dive into this. Alrighty, first and foremost, we've got Uriel scolding the group, but if you'll notice these golden like tassels hanging in front, at the top are two diamond-shaped objects, which could be D8s. Now again, the cast and creators of the show have revealed that they've hidden dice all over the place, so I wanted to call this one out, but that being said, there are a lot of diamond-shaped objects in this episode, and triangle-shaped objects, which triangles are D4s, so I'm not going to waste everyone's time by calling it out anytime a triangle appears in the episode. So just, let's just call this a catch-all for all triangles and diamonds. But if there are any like explicit D20s or anything like that, I will call them out. All right, and here I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the character designs for this whole show. I grew up watching a lot of anime. I mean, I still do, but something you'll notice, especially if you grew up on it, is that, for budgetary reasons, or otherwise, a lot of the times characters will always look the exact same. Like the main character will always be wearing the same outfit. They won't really have battle wounds for more than like the scene that they're occurring in. And I just got to give a shout out to Vox Machina for like going the extra mile with this type of stuff. Not only did the last episode we got whole new outfits for everyone for their, banquet gowns and fancy attire, but we have injuries that last more than the scene they're in. The great example here is Grog. He still has all these slashes on him from where Silas cut him up, and this has been true in previous episodes as well. I think in episode 2, after they defeat Brimscythe, Grog in the throne room is still covered in blood. And yeah, I mean, again, not really an Easter egg or anything, but just a really cool detail that I appreciate. All right, so we get another glimpse at this chest here, and I'm going to use this as an excuse to talk about this Raven skull again. Now, if you didn't see my episode 3 Easter egg video, I pointed out that this could be a reference to Pate de Rolo, who is this like dead rat companion to Laudna in Campaign 3. Now, I had a few people in the comments, completely justifiably, by the way, point out that this is probably a stretch because Campaign 3 just started like 3 months ago, basically, whereas this show has been in production for over 2 years. So chances are slim that they would have the foresight to put in references to Campaign 3, all the way back when this episode would have, been being storyboarded and drawn. Now, my rebuttal to that, if I could play devil's advocate, is that I think this might be the exception to that because, and slight Campaign 3 spoilers here, again, we're only about 12 episodes into Campaign 3 at the time of this recording, so still very early. And this is not like a major spoiler or anything. It's something that comes out within, the first handful of episodes. But that being said, maybe skip ahead a minute or so if you don't want any Campaign 3 spoilers. Okay, so as we know, Laudna is from Whitestone. So I think that draws a very, thick through line from this campaign to that one, clearly. So I think that, it's quite possible that while working on this show, Marisha was thinking about what her campaign 3 character would be, and perhaps was even inspired by the fact that they were putting so much, focus and intent on Whitestone in this Briarwood arc while working on this show, that she got inspired to create Laudna and her backstory, by putting her in Whitestone just from doing all this. So I think that it is possible for Marisha to have had that foresight here and drop in a little Easter egg, especially since, again, Laudna is from Whitestone. Delilah is currently, living in Whitestone. I mean, it could literally be that Raven skull that ends up on Pate's head. I do have a bit further to go with this, and it's definitely a reach, the next part of this, like, theory, if you will, but it makes more sense to talk about this in episode 5's breakdown. So yeah, now you have to watch that. So gotcha. All right, so next up we have the introduction of Jarrett, who is always one of my favorite NPCs from campaign 1. And this is as good a time as any to bring up again how there are going to be changes from the campaign 1 D&D stream to, the Legend of Vox Machina animated show, and this is one of them. Jarrett in the show is Sovereign Uriel's guard. He's there to police them. But in campaign 1, he was a guard that just Vox Machina themselves hired in order to, protect their keep. So it's been interesting to see kind of the morph and story here. I think it makes sense. And I'm excited to kind of see how the relationship evolves from this point forward. Like I said, I always love Jarrett. I think Eugene Bird is doing a fantastic job with the voice acting, and I honestly can't wait to see more of him. Okay, here we get a great little Keyleth Vax moment where she is druid crafting this flower and placing it in her ear, and he clocks this. Now, this is just one of those seed planting moments, and I'm not going to spoil like kind of what this is foreshadowing because it's beautiful, and I hope that you all watch campaign 1 and get to experience it yourselves. But I just love that they're, even this early kind of planting these things. And again, the moment that, if you've seen campaign 1, you know what I'm talking about, is just so good. So I love that they have the foresight to kind of do these things, and hopefully we eventually get there. And then next, we just have a great little moment between Vax and Vex. Vax is kind of freaking out that he may be becoming a vampire, but Vex kind of, like nods towards the window, and he looks and sees that he still has a reflection. He's like, oh, never mind. But, fun fact, in D&D, you actually become a vampire if you are killed by a vampire's bite attack and then buried. And then actually, even after that, you're not like a true vampire. You have to then like drink a true vampire's blood, and that's how you become like a full-fledged vampire. So, since Vex didn't die, wasn't buried, he was really in no danger of actually becoming a vampire. But fun moment here. So next up we have Scanlan revealing what he has deciphered so far from this book, and he mentions pyramids and spirits of the dead. Now both of those are just nice little nods of foreshadowing. Pyramids referring to the ziggurat, which he will later like uncover more about, and then spirits of the dead obviously in reference to the spirits that are going to brutally attack them later in this episode. So clearly that is something that is within Delilah's arsenal that she perhaps learned how to do from this very book. And as a final little detail, I love the fact that we got 2 healing potions in the background of this scene. And then I don't know if this was a reference to this clip or not, but it cracked me up either way. So enjoy. Alrighty, here we have Percy looking over the plans for Grayskull Keep. And if you watched my Easter egg video on episode 3, I already mentioned this, but those plans look strikingly similar to the original plans Matt mocked up in Photoshop, and the creators of the show just essentially, translated those 1-to-1 for Grayskull Keep in the show, and it's just fun to see. All right, next up we get our bad guy shot, and not too much to talk on here. Just thought it was cool to kind of get a glimpse of some of these characters for the first time, namely Anna Ripley, who is on the left of Delilah there. Super cool to see her in animated form, and this wolf is just badass. We actually got a quick glimpse of him in the book that they stole from her a bit earlier. I'll throw that up. And really the only like quote unquote main enemy we're missing from this shot would be Professor Anders. So I'll throw him up as well. And really this whole gang would look great carved on the side of a pistol. Okay, this next part contains a spoiler for episode 6, so if you haven't seen that, pause the video, come on back, or just skip to the next scene. But Percy is explaining, what happened, what the Dorellos did to him, and we see this moment of him trying to escape with Cassandra, yet she gets littered with arrows and, slumps to the ground, and he just has to keep running. However, in the next scene where Percy is running and is no longer looking back, you can notice Cassandra's head is raised up off the snow, so she's not dead. So next we catch up with Silas and Delilah, and they have made their way to a cemetery, and here we get a shot of this mausoleum with a raven atop it. And this is a reference to the Raven Queen, which I don't know if that's what the name is going to be in the show, because that may be copyright. It may not. I'm not sure. But the Raven Queen is the matron of death. She is essentially the god of death, and so it's just, cool to see her symbol atop this mausoleum. Then we dive into that freaky, and we get some more displays of Delilah's abilities here. They're in a graveyard. Her hand, is turning like a demonic, decrepit gray, and she is clearly wielding some necromantic energy here. And as we know, she raises the spirits of 3 undead, and I believe this is at least a close approximation to the create undead spell that she is casting here, which is like a 6th level spell. It's not going to be a 1-for-1 thing, and I'll talk more about the actual creatures that attack the group a bit later. But this is just more nods to kind of what evil and what magic she deals in. And I tried to place this symbol. I couldn't find this exact thing, with like the triangle within an upside down triangle and those lines coming out of it. I wasn't sure if those were lines or if those were just cracks in the ground. So if anybody can recognize this symbol, please let me know. There is another symbol that shows up in the book, which I'll throw up on the screen now. And there are some similarities, mainly the upside down triangle. And then these both kind of look like some of the schools of magic symbols in D&D, and I'll throw that up as well, but nothing is 1-to-1. So, I don't know if this is specifically referencing anything. It might just be a cool design, or, maybe it's the show's design for the necromancy school, even though it looks more like some of the other ones, like transmutation. But yeah, so if anyone has any thoughts on this, please let me know in the comments. All right, next we get a little moment where Keyleth attempts to cast sunlight but is unable to, and obviously that plays very nicely with how the episode ends with her, casting sunlight. But I just like this because in D&D you don't really have this situation. Like, if you know how to cast a spell, you know how to cast a spell, right? And especially in sunlight's case, or light rather, you just cast it. There's no like chance to miss or anything like with some spells that attack people. But for an animated show, that's not interesting, right? So I like how they're kind of showing characters, gain expertise with their different abilities. And there's another example of this that I'll talk about next episode with Scanlan. But I just think this is kind of a change from, D&D that makes more sense when you're trying to tell a narrative story here. So, that being said, moving forward, there are going to be instances where spells or abilities are not translated 1-to-1 from D&D, and I think that's fine. All right, so this next scene is just some great little character development of Vax and Vex. They've been, on the run or wandering kind of their whole life, going from place to place. At the end of episode 2, Vax is like, hey, we finally have a home again, in reference to getting this keep. And so here, Vex is like, if we try to escape with this group, we're going to get caught. But if you and I just escape, like, we easily could. So, what are we doing here? And, clearly it's kind of pointing to the pull between their natural kind of loner, even though they're together, loner lifestyle versus like ingratiating with this new group that they find themselves with. And, I just love this. And they even talk about, how they've gotten out of worse situations than this. And they reference Singorn, which is where their father is from and where they lived when they were kids until, clearly as hinted here, they escaped from that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I just love this. I just love this characterization. It kind of shows, them trying to bounce between those two worlds of maybe accepting a new family and continuing what's worked for them, being just doing their own thing. It also speaks to their skill sets that, the two of them easily could evade any unwanted attention and could escape here if they wanted to. And also just a nice final little nod here is they took all their weapons, and even in this scene right before this, they came in and took all the cutlery, all the supplies out of the kitchen just so they would have like nothing to use as a weapon. And yet here Vax is with a knife in his hand, like he was able to, sleight of hand, make sure he still had something to protect him and his sister with. So here we get a shot of the outside of the keep, and this isn't much, but allow me to nerd out here for a second. So we can see the moon in the sky, but Exandria has two moons, Catha and Ruidus. Catha is the one we can see there. Ruidus we cannot. And I just thought this was, again, cool and nice little attention to detail that Ruidus is on a much, much longer cycle. So there would be times when you could only see Catha, depending on where you are in the world. And I just think that's cool. I don't think we've seen Ruidus yet in any of the shots, so I'll be excited when that happens, and you best believe it's going to be included in the next breakdown if it does. Okay, next up we get this scene of Pike trying to communicate with her god. And I'm going to speak about things a little out of sequence here because it just makes sense to go ahead and talk about it here. But, at the end of this episode, Pike decides not to go with the party and she goes her own way because she is trying to repair this relationship we has with her god. And, clearly in this scene, like I said, she's trying to communicate, but there's nothing. There's no answer. And I mean, this is probably not a situation where it's like a one-to-one translation from D&D, but in D&D there is a spell called Commune that clerics have where they literally cast the spell to communicate with their god. Pike, I don't think, ever used that spell in Campaign 1, so again, chances are that's not what they're like trying to depict here, but I guess just fun fact. But yeah, so she's trying to commune, but is having no luck. And if you watched episode 3, I briefly spoke on this when her locket cracked, that in the campaign that happened as well, but it happened under vastly different circumstances. So, I won't get into that again here because I talked about it there, but she did go on a journey to repair it, and clearly that's kind of the direction we are now going in the show. It'll be interesting to, get fleshed out on the reasons that her locket cracked, since again this is not the same way this happened in the campaign, so interested to find that out. Also in this scene, and again at the very end of the episode, we get more Pike and Grog feels, and this was one of my favorite relationships in campaign 1, so it just makes me happy to see it expressed on the screen. And I don't remember if I talked about this in an Easter egg video or maybe it was on the podcast, but I just got to, again, shout out to, Travis and Ashley for their acting here, but Travis specifically just for creating such a cool character in Grog. He fills a lot of those stereotype boxes in terms of like, the big meathead barbarian that rages and, destroys things. Fits into a lot of tropes there, but then Travis just creates such great characters, and he has these moments of vulnerability and empathy and just big softy moments like with Pike here, and it's so good. And again, not a detail, not an Easter egg, but I had to give it a shout out. And this scene, I was so excited for this scene. So we get Percy in his workshop. And Percy spent a lot of his time in this workshop in campaign 1. So it was just awesome to see this. And, the little hidden compartment switch that opened up and shows his, pieces. And we get the schematic for bad freaking news, man. If you've seen all the episodes, you already, have a better idea of what this is. But bad news is one of Percy's main weapons from campaign 1. So I've been itching to see this thing. So it's cool that we actually get to see him design it and create it. And little lore drop here. You might have been wondering to yourself, this is like a high fantasy tropey type of show. We got our barbarians and our rangers and our druids, and then we have a guy that uses guns. What's that about? Why is everyone not running around with an AK-47? Well, Glad you asked, my friend. I'm happy to answer it. So, the game started D&D. They were playing Pathfinder, actually. But then when they decided to, turn this into a Twitch stream, they switched to D&D. Now, in Pathfinder, there is a gunslinger class. In D&D, there is not. So they kind of had to, morph it and make it fit. But because of that, there aren't typically guns in D&D. So for the lore and the canon to this story is that Percy invented them. So that is why, we see him here inventing yet another gun. But so that is why you won't see anyone else out in the world wielding guns. And we'll probably find out more about this in the show itself, but just wanted to give you that quick little piece for anyone that was curious. Speaking of lore drops, in this scene we also have Keyleth tell Percy about her Oramente. So for anyone that kind of wanted some more information on that, I'm sure the show will cover it, but I'm going to go ahead and give you the down low. So an Oramente is basically like this hero's journey that potential leaders of the Ashari have to go on. So Keyleth is an Ashari, she's a member of the Air Ashari, and there are 3 other sister tribes of Ashari throughout Exandria. We have Earth, Fire, Water, and Air, of course. So in order to prove herself, she must go on this Oramente, visit all 3 sister tribes, and prove her worth to them. Once that is complete, she is allowed to return home, and she's not allowed to return home before that is complete. And so I just love that we're already getting the story thread of this, and, hopefully we get to see all this happen on screen. Give us 6 seasons in a movie, baby. All right, finally, and I promise I'm going to stop talking about this scene soon. I just love the characterization of it and the kind of connection we got built here, because these are the 2 members of Vox Machina that are of high society. I mean, we have Percy, who is, the royal son of Whitestone, and we have Keyleth, who is on this Oramente to lead her people. So clearly she is of a high lineage as well. So, it's only natural that maybe those are the 2 that could empathize with each other, or rather at least Keyleth being the one to try to empathize with Percy here, because the whole group is worried about him, the whole your soul is forfeit and weird smoke coming out of him. I just like that Keyleth is the one that goes and tries to connect with them. All right, this part of the episode is where things start to go down. And I know a lot of you might have been worried about our poor boy Trinket out here in the dark and cold by himself. But don't worry, because as you can see here, he is wearing his patented plot armor. So now we finally get to meet these 3 amigos here, which have been running around devastating all the guards at Greyskull Keep and, even devastating Vox Machina as well. Now, I think if we were trying to find the closest one-to-one approximation of what these monsters would be in D&D, I think it's probably a Wraith. And, basically Wraiths do everything you see here. They can become incorporeal and move through other people or objects, and they also have a life drain ability, which I think is, probably what we're seeing when they dig their claws into someone and the black ooze comes out. It basically reduces your health, and if you get all the way reduced to 0, you die. But also, the Wraiths have sunlight sensitivity, which, if you see the episode, that's how they turn things around. So I feel like that's probably what this is here. Earlier, when we were talking about Delilah and the spells she was casting, I attributed it to create undead, was probably the closest approximation. I don't think you can make Wraiths with create undead, but honestly, I don't know. So I probably shouldn't even be saying this. But yeah, these are some baddies. And okay, the thing is with this episode, I looked all over for the Matt NPC, and I found him in episode 5 and 6. So it's not, he's got to be in every episode. They wouldn't put him in 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. So after scouring this, I think this Wraith in the middle here is supposed to be the Matt NPC. He's got Matt's glorious, iconic hair, and there's no one else in the episode that really comes close. I mean, I've looked at all the guards in the various scenes. Some of the guards are voiced by Matt, but they do not have the iconic Matt NPC face and hair. So this Wraith is the closest thing we have, and I refuse to believe they just skipped episode 4. So I think this is him. I don't know how you guys feel about it. Let me know if somebody else found that Matt NPC that we've seen in the other episodes in this one somewhere, because it is possible that I missed it. But for now, this is my best guess. All right, this next room has probably my favorite Easter eggs of this episode. We've got the table. So this table is an exact replica of the Wormwood table that they all played on during Campaign 2. So for campaign 3 that's going on now, they actually built a whole new table, so they don't use this one anymore, which may even be why it gets destroyed in this scene. But that may be just reading too much into it. But so that is super fun. But then here on the left, and I may be seeing things just because I want to see them, and it may not actually be a nod to this, but on that chest, we got a rolled up carpet. And Vox Machina had a very, very famous magic carpet in campaign 1. So I feel like this has to be a nod. I'm not saying that carpet in this scene is literally magic, but I feel like its placement, it's just gotta be, right? It's just gotta be. I hope it is. Okay, this next shot is just absolutely beautiful, and I just wanted to include it, just to include it, if nothing else. But I can think of a few things to say with this. So we get our next installment of the Keyless is the badass, she just has to believe in herself moment, which, what is the count on that? Like 5 thus far in the show? I'm loving it. Give me 65 more. But also, just, nice, again, attention to detail. Light, we know, injures these wraiths, or at least allows them to be injured. But in addition to that, the light spell will also cancel out any darkness spells that have been cast. And as you know, throughout this episode, the wraiths have been extinguishing all torches and, sources of light, which, doesn't have to be a one-to-one connection, but could be them utilizing the darkness spell. So it's cool that, not only does the light injure them, but it literally is like whisking away the darkness. All right, next up is a blink and you miss it type of moment, but one of my favorite parts of the whole episode. As Percy is leaving, you can see this jar of, yeah, that's right, blue poop in the background. And if you've seen campaign 1, you know what this is. But for those of you that haven't, let me bless you with this clip.
The contents of the potion seem to have had some effect, as the remnants of what you leave behind have a very soft blue glowing hue to them.
Magic poop?
I left a magic
shed
dump.
a diamond.
Do we need
Or
to
a
collect
Smurf.
the dump?
Nope, we should leave the dump.
Are you gonna be able to like see through the dump?
He's covering his face. I think we need the blue. I think we need
No,
the blue
no,
shit.
Can
He's
you
gonna be able
cast
to see
detect
through the
magic
poop.
on the poo?
Oh, are
It's
we
already
there?
magical
No,
poop.
we're not
Are
there.
we there? We're not
We're
there.
not there. It's
We're
just
not there.
Scanlan.
So he's just shitting.
He's just leaving it.
So I leave and rejoin my fellows,
great
wiping the
tribute
tear
to
from my eye and the poo from my bottom.
Well, I love you, Ashley.
This is what happens when we don't have any direction.
But what's the purpose of the
need to
potion? To
do?
make your
Well-
poo blue?
So I took a potion that will let me see through my poo
Okay.
and be able to check in on Pike from time to time. I ordered a potion from.
Will she realize that you can see her through the poop?
I certainly hope not. I certainly hope not.
Alrighty, you guys, as we're wrapping up this episode, just have a few more things. I think I mentioned at the beginning of this episode when talking about the changes to Jarrett's character that there were probably going to be a lot of changes in the show compared to the Twitch stream, just as, a consequence of adapting to this new medium. And again, there's going to be a lot of nuance to trying to pick out every single literal change, and I'm not going to do that. But one that was big enough to mention here, I think, is what happened with this attack in the campaign. So instead of wraiths, we didn't get those, but the Briarwoods sent these invisible creatures, and not to steal the book, because the book did not exist in the campaign, but instead to kill Desmond, who, if you remember, is the carriage driver for the Briarwoods. So in the campaign, Vox Machina actually took him prisoner and was holding him prisoner in their keep, and they were trying to get information out of him. So the Briarwoods sent these invisible creatures to go and kill him before he could tell them anything. And then aside from that, the one last thing I wanted to talk about was when Pike was leaving here. Now, we spoke on this briefly when we were talking about Pike and Grog's relationship, but just one other thing I wanted to fill in for those of you that weren't familiar is that back during the campaign, Ashley Johnson was actually off working on various projects quite frequently. So she would miss Critical Role a lot, as in, Ashley Johnson, therefore Pike, would not be at sessions playing D&D. So Matt would oftentimes have to, think up canonical reasons for why Pike was not with them. And this journey to go fix her locket, even though that is something she needed to do, was one of those things. So it's interesting to see how they're handling this. You know, I wasn't sure going into the show if they were going to retcon that and Pike would just be with them the whole time, or if they would have, you know, creative waves of explaining why she left. So, you know, thus far we're getting the latter, which I'm excited to see it play out. And I wonder how often they will do stuff like this, you know, depending on how many future seasons we get. Alrighty, y'all, that's going to do it for episode 4. Thanks for coming on the journey with me. I feel like this video is probably at least 30 minutes long, but for whatever reason, I feel like I didn't find very many things. I don't know why I feel that way, but I'm excited to jump into episodes 5 and 6 because I feel like they had more to chew on. So be looking out for those. However, I think probably the next thing that I'll upload will be the podcast Blake and I do discussing episodes 4 through 6. So if you haven't checked out our podcast, would love it if you did. That's where we'll kind of describe our thoughts and reactions and reviews on the episodes, and you know, a little bit of theory crafting more from Blake because he hasn't actually seen campaign 1, and then you know these breakdown videos are where you're gonna get, you know, my analysis and my thoughts because I don't want to spoil anything for him. But yeah, so check out the podcast if you haven't. We'll probably be up in the next day or two, and then hopefully episode 5 and 6 breakdowns not too long after that. But yeah, thanks for stopping by. Don't forget you can follow us at the Pixelists, and I will see you soon.